July the 5th, 2019. Guys, you're looking at the earthquake map, and we're looking at Southern California, about 100 miles northwest of Los Angeles. And it's called Ridgecrest, the basic area. And as I'm doing this video, guys, since I launched the recorder, watch this ticker right here in the top left. It keeps rolling with aftershocks in this map. Notice I have it at 7 days, and we'll go into that a little deeper so you'll understand what I'm doing. 7 days, all magnitudes in the U.S. If you zoom into this map, it'll tell you of the 3,242 earthquakes that the entire globe has, 1,037 have occurred here. This is 7 days, but let me go all the way to the bottom of this and point out something. Let's go back to the first quake. Again, this started 7 days ago. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see on the July the 1st, you had a 1.5. On July the 1st, you had a 1.5. Then that was all. Then on July the 2nd, you had a 1.0. That was it. So of the, let's see what it is, 1,037 quakes, all but 3 have occurred since yesterday, just to point this out. And guys, when you have a big quake, it's your first instinct to think, well, especially 2 in a row, that it's good because this area is very dangerous, and especially if you go all the way to Northridge, which this is not. This is part of the Searle Valley. But guys, the amount of pressure that is in the area, and the quakes are going up, just went to 1030 up, 1038, guys, is amazing. They've been watching for a strain relief, and it's not just Southern California and this area here, guys, in the Searle Valley. You know, you had the Northridge quake. That was a powerful quake. But it all started, and let me say that before I go there, but it started here yesterday with a 6.2. This is Cascadia. This is another area that's locked and loaded. It has caused one of the largest earthquakes on the planet before. And what happens is, because of all the aftershocks, that's the telltale. If you have a big quake and there's not very many aftershocks after it, guys, then there was a major strain relief, pressure relief. But if the aftershocks continue like this, when first here, if you look at that, that's 196 kilometers west-southwest of Bella Bella, Canada. Again, at the very tip of the Cascadia fault zone. And guys, there's aftershocks today. You've got this quake is a 5.6. Notice today, 12:58 UTC time. And again, guys, you're not seeing pressure relief from the quakes yesterday. You're seeing that it's shifted, and the pressure is building even more now because of that shift. When it shifts, it relocks. You understand what I'm saying? It slipped a little bit, then it caught. Or we would not be having over 1,000 aftershocks down in the Searle Valley. And you also have a big steam plant there. I'm not saying that they're causing this because of the way that because of the depth that they drill and the pressure and all that. Guys, we've been watching our magnetopods get hammered. And when that happens, our shields are weak, and gamma radiation will burn you. It'll burn the plants, and it feeds into our magnetic lines, our magnetic field lines that your compass reads, into the core of this planet. And the magma heats up. When magma heats up, water heats up. When you have underground big aquifers that they tap into that are heated from below by large lava fields, then as they become hot, what happens is you can have what's called a geothermal explosion. And Quake Lake, guys, up near Yellowstone in that area, formed from a geothermal explosion that knocked trees down and created winds of over 100 miles an hour. Massive landslides. A lot of people lost their lives. Highways collapsed. Homes collapsed. But geothermal can be a major factor. And that's what you would have in Yellowstone. You wouldn't have a large magma event if that ever went. But a geothermal explosion, guys, is tremendous. Now, change the map from 7 days to 1 day, and this is magnitude 2.5. So in this area, we've had 206 of the 247 earthquakes today. These are aftershocks. You can see over to the very left, 2.6s, 3.9s. We've had a 5.2 or 5.4, excuse me, here this morning. Still strong aftershocks. That means the pressure slipped, but it's still very strong behind the event that caused this slippage. It's not relieving. It's rebuilding for something bigger, and we've seen it many times. What some of the geologists talk about, if you look at the different articles, even though sometimes they amaze me. I saw an article yesterday. Many of you saw it out of California. It was a lady spokesperson or a geologist for the USGS, and she says no one can predict earthquakes. But guys, we've watched too many solar flares come in and predict the timing within minutes of the strike on our planet and major quakes. It can be done. This was not solar flare related, but we've seen our magnetopods being bombarded lately, guys, and it was outside energy. And again, CERN is not running. We've watched all of this. If you've seen the thousands of videos that were taken down, I think over 700 in the last takedown. Let's leave it at that. But it says that Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Barbara are inching towards Alaska. Places on the other side of the San Andreas, such as Sacramento and the Mojave Desert, are sliding towards Mexico. But in some places along this fault, such as areas on the San Andreas, the land on both sides of the fault are locked. Even as land further away continue to move, what is that telling you, guys? That those locked areas on the San Andreas, when they give, it will be major. And this area, again, is known for its wide surface cracks. That's why it's one of the most heavily watched areas. It says eventually the San Andreas, as well as other faults throughout California, will have to rupture to relieve mounting tectonic strain. Plate tectonics hasn't suddenly stopped. And as I was saying, the 1,000 or so aftershocks is telling us that it just moved a little and that pressure is building up. And now on top of it, at the Cascadia, another 5-point quake. That pressure always seems to move almost clockwise around the ring of fire. You have strong quakes for a long time on the other side in Japan and the further south from there. And we saw a quake not too long ago, guys, about a week over in Kamchatka, in Russia, off the Bering Sea. So it always seems, most of the time, to move clockwise. So we see that pressure building again. Now these aftershocks. And again, in 1906, there was a magnitude 7.8 earthquake that hit San Francisco. When that one hit, guys, it was an 18-foot split on the surface. Just look up Point Reyes in Marion County in San Francisco in the 1906 7.8 quake. A lot of information there. Now, in the LA Times, they're talking about Ross Stein and Vulcan Selvagen. They're earthquake scientists, and they were on their blog at Tumblr, and someone asked the question, what about just the area that was hit by the Independence Day quake yesterday? Is that area now relieved of quake strain? They said it actually probably made things worse for parts of some faults in that region. So the two wrote that they believe that parts of 3 other faults in remote areas of California were actually brought closer to failure by the 4th of July quake. And in fact, they wrote the area hit by Thursday's quake likely became loaded with more seismic strain after the 2 previous tremblers. In the 1872 Owens Valley and the 1992 Landers earthquake. They had, those were major fault zones, guys, and this pressure yesterday put it down back into those areas. So to understand the history of these quakes, take the time to look up the 1992 Landers area and study for yourself and share that information. It says, and they also was asked, what has California's history told us about what moderate quakes can do? Sometimes a moderate quake after its series of aftershocks can lead to a period of seismic quiet. Other times it can usher in a new area of these tremblers. And so that's my point of this video. that we were lucky yesterday. There was damage done, infrastructure damage, and some houses burned, but no one was killed. That's had to do with the remoteness of the area compared to some of the other quakes that we've seen in Southern California. And this question came up. It says, what does an era of earthquakes look like? And so they went back. It says, for instance, 75 years before, in the 75 years before the great 1906 earthquake that destroyed much of San Francisco and shaking in flames, there were 14 earthquakes of magnitude 6 or greater. Think of that. That's not very many quakes in a 75-year period. And that was in the Bay Area. Stein had previously said in an interview, since the 1906 quake, which was a magnitude 7.8, listen, there has been only 3. Angelenos might remember what is known as the earthquake storm of the 80s and 90s, as tallied by Caltech seismologist Inge Hawkinson. It began with the Whittier Nares tremor in 1987, magnitude 5.9, which killed 8, followed by Pasadena, 1988, 4.9, Montebello, 1989. The guys, these are year after year. Look, 87, 88, 89, 90. Upland in 1990, Sierra Madre in 1991, 5.8, which killed a woman, and ended with Northridge in 1994, which killed at least 57 people. So 6 points are rare in this area, guys, and that's why yesterday, not just I, everybody that covers these were on YouTube talking about it. Now, guys, going back to March the 9th, 2011, one of the many videos that we lost was called Earthquake Prediction 101. And I redid it a few times and updated it. But we were watching a series of solar flares leave the sun. And they were X flares, very powerful coronal mass ejections also involved in that. And it began on March the 9th. And the next flare, the initial photon burst energy, can travel to the Earth in 8.2 minutes. Your coronal mass ejections can take 48 hours. They're a proton wave, but that initial burst of light, that energy flash, that X-ray, 8.2 minutes. And we watched this series of quakes start, and we watched the big one hit Japan in the afternoon as the sun turned Japan straight at the sun, and it took the brunt of it. But on the 9th, there was a 7.3 off the east coast of Japan, and it led some people to be complacent when 2 days later a historic magnitude 9 earthquake struck, just as that solar flare, guys. Many of you have seen those videos. If I can find one of the copies, I'll put it back up. It says some people ignored protocol and failed to immediately evacuate before the catastrophic tsunami hit. Again, on the 9th, we were talking about these solar flares hitting the Earth, and we've been watching these earthquakes. And I mentioned the lady geologist yesterday over in California with USGS saying there's no way to predict earthquakes. If anyone tells you they can, they're lying to you. Now, guys, that's shameful because of the Japan quake. They could have said they maybe could not have stopped all of the nuclear destruction that continues to this day. But some things could have been shut down, but hundreds of thousands of lives could have been saved if they would only come off that high horse, put a little extra chapter into the books that the geologists study in college, and add that solar flares in the sun cause most of the earthquakes on this planet, but to this day they refuse to, and it's to their own shame and their own detriment as a watchman. They need to look up what a watchman is in the Bible. If you fail to warn people, and you're the scientists that watch the instruments, you have access that we have to scratch and crawl and find and wonder if it's even accurate and do the best we can. But you're watching the instruments and you know what's happening, and you fail to warn people after we watched our magnetopods collapse for 3 days, then their blood is on your hand, my friend. So, just a little rant there, guys, because I've studied it too long. Again, without the live images and live instrumentation that they have, and hoping that what we find is accurate and hasn't been tampered down and backed up. And they talk about this. It says the closer to home in 1857, that great quake. It was preceded an hour earlier in the Monterey County area by 5.6 and a magnitude 6-point earthquake an hour before that one. So the larger quakes are seen after a powerful quake, your strong 5s, your 6. And then if it's going to be quiet, if that released the strain, that's the point of the video, then you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief, but not with over 1,000 aftershocks. It's not over yet. So guys, if you're in these areas, there are earthquake warning and preparations that they put out in California, just like they do here in the South for hurricanes. So let's just quickly take a look at that. Now this article says, in general, if you're an owner of an older home or building, retrofit it if it needs it. And if you rent, ask the landlord about it. Has it been retrofitted? Is it more earthquake proof than it used to be? Stock up on food, water, and medicine to be self-sufficient for 2 weeks. Guys, we have the best survival food on the planet. We have the best water filters. We normally have sales that no one else, no matter how big their platform, have, because we've been there for a long time with My Patriot Supply. Now, we don't sell medicine, but there's books on there on surviving with medicinal plants. And there's hundreds and hundreds of medicinal plants out there that people survived on for thousands of years. It says, plan for your workplace to have a continuity plan. It says, keep an eagle eye wherever you live or work, and imagine all the possible things. Look around yourself now, you guys, that could fall on you, your loved ones and your pets. Head to your hardware store earthquake prep section to find ways to bolt bookcases down and keep large objects from falling on you when shaking comes. Guys, if you're gonna take an L bracket or a strap and you're gonna put it on the top of a bookshelf or whatever, back of a tall dresser, make sure that the back of the strap or the back of the L bracket is into a stud. Don't just try to use a brace in or behind the sheetrock. That's not going to help you much in this case, okay? And guys, if you make sure, if you feel that coming, if you feel the shake happen, immediately get away from anything like that can fall on you, okay? Also, if you can, cut the gas off to your house immediately. Pull the meter, cut your main breakers off so that if lines pull apart, you won't have a fire going. If your gas lines pull apart, you won't have an explosion. There's things that you can do to help yourself be prepared on that, and especially in some of the older structures. But guys, we're watching this. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe. Watch for a full report coming up on our magnetopause. Yesterday morning, before these quakes started, the magnetopause, had got a recording of that, had been somewhat calm compared to what we've seen it, but around 1,500 hours, and the quakes were starting to get bad at around 1,700 hours UTC time. You can look at it on the earthquake maps. We started to see activity. We did not see the distortions, but I did see 2 compression waves hit that were pretty strong. But the damage had already been done as far as the damage from our shields getting impacted the way they had done. That puts pressure on the earth in a couple of different ways. When you see that much energy blasted in through our atmospheres and it gets to the surface, guys, you can feel it. Then that is one thing. The earth heats up. You've got a tremendous amount of energy building up. But also, and this is one of the things I've always said about the solar flares and the coronal mass ejections, as you strike the earth and you compress our magnetopause, it affects all the way down to our atmosphere. It's like squeezing a water balloon. You've got 2 things that happen: pressure on our fault zones, and then the release of that pressure. Squeeze a water balloon, don't bust it, and then when you release it, then it expands back out. That expansion can be as deadly as the compression. So again, the USGS has a lot of good information. You've got to watch the sun at all times, because the major quakes in our lifetime are caused by the sun. Look at Fukushima, guys. It's a heads up. Be safe.